Welcome to the Real Life Buyer podcast. In this podcast, you will hear interviews with business owners, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, authors, and technical specialists in their field. These professionals will hasten your development, accelerate your career, and broaden your business know-how. Now, introducing your host, Dave Barr, interviewing with a purchasing twist.
Hello and welcome to the Real Life Buyer. Do you wish to build a better business but are struggling with where to start? One often struggles to see the wood for the trees, and it makes sense to gain a perspective from a well-respected and experienced business professional and mentor who may step back and analyse one's business from a different, unbiased perspective. My guest today is William Buist, a strategic mentor, speaker and author with a resume that includes ethics officer, finance director and collaboration specialist, to name a few. William gained his Batchelor of Science at the University of St Andrews and intriguingly also sports the qualification of Chartered Insurer. As an author, his most recent 5-star rated book is Intentional Mastery, Step Beyond Your Expertise and Build Better Business. That was published in February 22, so it's available to purchase right now. Today, I wish to explore how William uncovers opportunities, supports, educates and helps drive business improvement and innovation with his clients. So, without further ado, I welcome William onto the podcast. Hi, William.
Hi, Dave, and very glad to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me on.
Absolute pleasure. Been very excited to have you on this week. We've had some discussions previously, and I've had the pleasure of reading your book. So it'd be great to dive into that in a little bit. But before we start, certainly for the audience's benefit, can you tell us about your background and how you became an expert in building better businesses?
Sure. Well, you've touched on a bit in the introduction, and thank you for those kind words. I started my career in the insurance industry. Kind of fell into that on leaving university. I wasn't 100% sure where I wanted to end up, but I knew I was strong in analytical skills and those kind of things, and insurance opportunity arrived. I worked there for, the best part of 25 years in the insurance industry, ending up as the chief underwriter at Lloyd's TSB Insurance. So, pretty successful career and ending with quite a senior job. And a chartered insurer is kind of one of those qualifications that you pick up along the way in an industry that allows me to have some recognition from my peers, but also recognition by the regulators and those sorts of things of the level of knowledge that we have. And that is part of that journey of learning about how do we develop expertise, how do we develop mastery, as I now understand it, in what we do. I left that role in 2001, joined a small consultancy firm for a couple of years, and then set up my own business after that. And it was really around working with small business owners and teams of people. When I was in the insurance industry, very much like a small business, when you run a project within a bigger business, you're effectively running a startup and getting things set up, working and running with a team of people. And I learned a lot about how the people gel together, how they collaborate, how they learn when they have no knowledge at the beginning of something through to when they are recognized as one of the most experienced, most expert, and even masters of what they do. And I've spent the last 10 or 15 years being really curious about what do we need to do to help people make that journey, especially when we're in a leadership role, and particularly, in the context of working with suppliers and people whom you don't necessarily have a direct reporting or controlling interest in. We've got to use influence and use our leadership skills to encourage people to work in the way that we'd like them to work for the best result for everybody.
Fabulous. Now, obviously taking that step from being in a quite senior position to moving into your own business must have been a little bit daunting, perhaps. Maybe you just relished the opportunity, who knows? But there must have been some inspirations here. So, what would you say was the inspirations behind your decision to focus on helping business owners become, as you refer to it, masters of their markets, operate perhaps more effectively and help them stand out from their competitors?
Well, I think it was kind of recognition that within one organization, you can do some great work and make a real difference to the customers of that organization, whoever they are. But I've always been, kind of keeping a watching eye on business in general, not just in my own sector, but across a wide range of sectors. And I started to realize, when I was heading towards the end of my insurance career, that a lot of the issues we saw in the insurance industry around leadership and people development were issues that were being talked about in the motor industry and in the accountancy world and in the legal world. And I began to think, actually, I want to take what I now know and bring it to a wider audience so that we can start to make a real difference and build better business for all of us, because it's in our collective interests, in the national interest, and it's in our personal interest too.
Yeah. Were there any particular, clients in the early days that really, motivated you to say, this is exactly the right decision I've made? I really want to jump into this, help more people. Were there a particular turning point, would you say, that in the first 3 to 6 months that really gave you that, gratitude of making the decision you made?
Yeah, I'm not sure it happened that quickly, Dave, to be honest. I think there was quite a long period when I was kind of pondering, have I done the right thing? Because it takes time to get known and to build a network in a new arena, which I was in. I had a strong network in the insurance industry, and for the first couple of years, a lot of my clients were contacts from that industry, despite what I've just said about wanting to take it to a wider audience. That's where the clients turned up from. And that's because I had a reputation there, and people knew me. So it takes time to build that wider reputation. And really, it wasn't until 2008 and the banking crisis in 2008, which, maybe with hindsight, we look back on and think, I should have seen that coming a bit more clearly than we did, but we didn't. Nobody in the world really saw it coming in the way that it did. And it affected so many smaller businesses, who were suddenly finding they'd lost their clients if they had them. They were struggling to get business. People were reluctant to spend money because money was tight. And, I see some similarities, in all honesty, with where we are today. And that was the point when I knew I'd made the right decision. I was finding it tough too, but I knew, because I was doing the things that I was also teaching and mentoring other people to do, and they were working, I knew that I'd landed on my feet, got the right things in the right place. And whilst it was tough, I still came out the other side with a strong business and a good set of clients that were also now building better business by following some of the things that you've read about in the book.
Yeah, so that must have been a little bit of, an epiphany in some respects. You felt vindicated in your decision. You were helping people. You've gone through a very tough time. You emerged the other side, perhaps in a way that you feel it was successful, and it's only going to go one way now, and that's to increase, obviously, improve continually.
Yeah, very much so. And I think, when I do some professional speaking, as you touched on in the introduction as well, and when the pandemic arrived, a lot of the big events where we might go and speak to large audiences just didn't happen, because you didn't have events with large audiences. A lot of it went online, and we had to learn new skills then as well. And that too, I think by then I had really got to grips with this whole principle of taking people from beginners, what I call explorers, when you have no knowledge, through being a novice and a practitioner, where you're good at what you do, but only in the place where you do it, in effect, and building expertise towards mastery. All was making sense. And so, yes, I had to take a step back and learn how to work online and using Zoom and presenting and keeping audience participation up and all those things in a new environment. But I had the roadmap to tell me how to get there. And so I was able to do that very quickly and help others to do that quickly. And it was a real vindication, as you say. It really made me feel like I've been really grateful for the tough times as well as the good times, because the tough times gave me the insights I needed, and the good times gave me the opportunity to take real joy from it as well.
Fantastic. So let's touch base on your book. We've mentioned it a few times, the Intentional Mastery book. Now, writing a book on its own is an incredible should we say, achievement on its own. How would you say the journey was for you? And what may the audience find when peeling back the covers to help them take stock and perhaps make a step in changing their own business, having read it?
Yeah, so it was a very interesting journey. It started from a birthday party, actually, and probably maybe with a glass or two too many of of adult beverages, as we say. And I made a commitment to a group of my friends. And what I said was, I really need to write it all down. And I wasn't really thinking about writing a book, but that's what everybody in the room heard. And so it kind of got a life of its own. And I'm really grateful for that. And I was really grateful for my friends holding my feet to the fire a little bit and keeping me accountable for doing that. And I spent 18 months or so, thinking about what is the whole, I could write, about a whole host of things, but to get something to a book rather than an encyclopedia, I needed to be a bit choosy. And so I spent that time, writing down, designing the structure of the book and thinking about what I need to go into it. And then I reflected on what I'd written so far. And, I was both pleased with it and disappointed. Pleased with it because it was very clearly some really valuable material. Disappointed because what I'd written didn't have any William Buist in it. It had no soul. It was, at that point, a bit of a business manual. And I really didn't want to write a manual. So I took the good structural pieces out of what I'd done and put in stories and told a bit of my history. And you've read the book, so you've heard about my mother and the various things that went on there, and building walls in the garden and all sorts of odd stories that have analogies into the business world. And I hope that has made the book a much more readable, much more relatable experience for readers, and that they get to know me a little bit in the process, as well as getting to know what they need to know to build a better business.
Yeah, and it's certainly the personality, the author comes out of the book. It's not a dry book in any way. It's not facts and figures. There's a lot of information in there. Absolutely. I showed you, just as we came onto the podcast, the amount of markings I have in the book, and I've only put little stickers on to a number of them just to bring out the most significant points. But throughout the book, I've written in there and starred different things. So if people take that as an indication of there's an awful lot of great material in there, I think that's a very positive thing to say.
Well, thank you, David. That's very kind. Thank you.
No, absolutely. I did immensely enjoy it. Now, one particular section jumped out at me. I love the word collaboration. I've been a professional buyer for too many decades now. And you talk about 5 stages of collaboration, which is obviously most pertinent about a relationship between the buyer and the seller. So can you tell the audience more about your thoughts here, and what are the 5 stages as you see them?
Of course. And actually, this really came about. I tell the story in there of how when I joined TSB just before the merger for Lloyd's and TSB, and I was hired to lead a project at TSB. And of course, as soon as the merger was announced, most projects that hadn't actually really got off the ground got put on hold, including mine. So I was new to the business and sitting with a project that had been put on hold and I suspected would probably be cancelled. In the end, it was, although not completely, but it made me realize I was unknown in that organization, relatively unknown. So I had to find ways to collaborate quickly with people. And that's the background to developing this kind of 5 C's of the journey that I took then. The first of them is consciousness and becoming aware of the need to collaborate. And that was, so I've told that story. That's how I became conscious of my need to collaborate. The second is conversation, and really taking time to spend time with people in conversation, not just about what's the issue that's in hand, but, also, what are you doing? What's happening at the weekend? The stuff that builds trust and relationships, and being interested in them and being interesting to them. So that's conversation, the second stage. Then we kind of move on to finding ways to cooperate. And I describe cooperation as the stage of mutual self-interest, where it's the you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours game. But I'm scratching your back because you've got an itch, and you're scratching my back because I've got an itch. It's our self-interest that we're supporting. That moves on then to collaboration. And collaboration is where we have mutual shared goals. It's where we start working as one team and the parts become synergistic, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Everybody aligns, everybody knows why. And when I was running big projects and when I work with, projects today with teams of people, when you reach that collaborative stage, the cost of oversight, the cost of managing the project, of making sure that people know what they're doing, all falls away because people instinctively know what they're there to do and they just get on with it, and things get done, much quicker with fewer mistakes because everybody knows their place and their role and how to make things work. So that's collaboration. But I actually think you can go a step further than that as well. And you can make that whole collaborative environment really cohesive by building a community within the business or across the businesses if you're working with suppliers and customers. And creating that cohesion takes a bit of time and effort, and making sure that you're constantly, going back and having the conversations and cooperating on perhaps some things on the side and collaborating on the main thing, and just helping each other to be the best that you can be together. And when things go wrong, if you're in a great community, there's always somebody there to catch you. And I think that's the most important part of it.
Yeah, it's really good. I enjoyed reading through those sections. I love the fact that you took the time to take some of the individuals, if not all of the team. You all went out for a walk in the countryside, or whatever it is. You got out of the office. You didn't just, immerse yourself in the task in hand. And taking people away sometimes from, what's at the front line, as you say, enables people to become a little bit more chatty, a bit more open. You start finding out more things that are personal, which is, in the end, a long run, a benefit. And the thing I would possibly add when you talk about cohesion and community, the other C I would mention, from my perspective, is that you start to care. Not just care about the project, you start to care about each other and what each other thinks. And I find that little extra caring about each other makes all the difference, more considerate when you're talking to each other and bearing in mind how you say things, why you say things as well.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And you're right, that time when we would, if a problem came up, I'd take the team out, go for a walk around the park, because by the time we'd finished walking around the park a couple of times, whatever the problem was had faded into, that's just a little local difficulty. We now know how to solve that. We can get on with it. And we built that strength of relationship that genuinely showed that we all did care. And that created a very different environment, a much less pressured environment, actually, a lot less stress in the general workplace, rather than that kind of, oh, good heavens, this has happened. What a disaster. Whose fault is it? I mean, that tends to be the...
Indeed, yeah. No, absolutely. And those are sort of relationships that aren't just there for the project. They're there beyond the projects. You've got started to care about each other, probably gone out for a few beers or whatever the case may be. But, even when you finish that particular project, you can come together with any of those individuals and start from a great position. It's not a standing start every time. And I think there's a lot of benefit in that kind of relationship as you grow together as well.
Yeah, it's 22 years since I left the bank, and I still have friends that were colleagues back then, who I meet up with, who ring me when they want a bit of advice, or who I would ring if I wanted a bit of advice. And that isn't that usual, I think, in those kind of working relationships.
Absolutely. So let's come back out now and start thinking about the clients, the people you've helped. And I'm intrigued to understand what, from your experience, has drawn now. What are some of the most perhaps common, perhaps diverse challenges that you help businesses face, and how have they changed over the course of the years?
Yeah, that's a fabulous question. And two halves, and I'll pick them in two bits. So some of the most interesting challenges, I think, often are the ones that appear to be kind of so big that they're almost existential for a business on the surface, and often transpire to be quite small changes that are needed to put things right. And I'd go back to 2008 banking crisis or the pandemic, where both occasions I've had businesses come to me, almost, the business owner almost in tears. I don't know what I'm going to do. It's a disaster, those kind of emotions flowing through them. And some of the speakers that I've worked with over the years, when the pandemic arrived, they literally got phone call after phone call after phone call, cancelling appointments and work. And we're looking, really into a completely blank diary, having been really busy up until the point of lockdown. For some of them, they chose to kind of ride it out. This won't last long. And at the time, that was the kind of considered opinion. The lockdown was 2 or 3 weeks, it'll all get sorted and we can go back to normal. Well, of course, we know that now wasn't the case. But with that background, they thought, well, I can last a few months, so we'll just ride it out. And others were flipping their business and trying to do as I did, to say, well, actually, let's move everything as much as we can online and think about what can we do, what skills have I got that I can transfer into a new way of delivering the value that I've got to share with the world. And in general, the people who took that route, and that was the route I was advising, certainly did better in the medium term and significantly better in the long term. So that's, one thing is to look for, well, actually, what have I got to fall back on? When things go horribly, horribly wrong, what skills have I got in the business? Not necessarily just with me, but with the other people I'm working with. And how can I take those skills and apply them in a new way? In terms of another example, and thinking about the second half of your question, I worked recently with a training company. It was a family business, and the family were reaching the end of the family line. There was nobody left in the family who wanted to continue in the business. And so they were trying to make sure the business was transferred to new owners in a way that protected the things they felt were really valuable and they built over time as part of its legacy, whilst also making sure that all of the people in the business were protected and given the best possible opportunities they could be. And that business set up a new management team. Some of the people in that team had a lot of experience of the business. Others were relatively new to it. And some had a lot of experience of management and leadership, and others were relatively new to that. So it was a good, as you describe it, a business smorgasbord, really, of skills. And I worked with them in a slightly different way. I worked with them as a mastermind group. So I was meeting with them once a month, holding the space for that group to share their challenges, their emotions, their feelings of where things were working well and where they were not working so well, and enabling them to look for solutions both within themselves and in the wider workforce that they had. And of course, giving some guidance on occasions when necessary. But the biggest piece of work I did really was staying quiet, providing the space for them to think without the constant pressure of the day-to-day of the office, and allowing them to see the talent that they each brought in a way that enabled them to really get to know each other and build that community that we were talking about earlier. So I'm not sure if that entirely answers your question, but hopefully it's part of the way there, Dave.
Yeah, it's interesting. So how would you say, if you have to have some tangible measures, some metrics, would you say there's some specifics, you started here and you ended up there? Is there any particular things that you could draw out and say, the success of this was measured by?
Yeah, I think the success of, that last example I gave, the success of creating, a really effective senior management team of 4 that was replacing what was one single managing director, the owner of the business before, the head of the family, was that they successfully sold the business to another training company who's maintained the brand, has maintained all of the office, retained all of the people in the organization, and adopted a lot of their practices within their existing business. So it's been a really synergistic purchase. I can be quite cynical sometimes about mergers and acquisitions because I see them being undertaken for what I think are the wrong reasons, in order to take out a competitor. And I was thinking, actually, why not try to be your very best, and then you don't need to compete. You could make a bigger pie, and like we can all do with some of that. So, there was that side. That's one measure of success. In my mentoring work, clearly, I'm working more one-to-one with people in that work. My measure of success is that they're achieving their business goals and they're seeing their business hit the targets that they set for it at the time they set them, and not, well, we want to double the size of the business, and yeah, we double the size of the business, but it takes twice as long as they want. To me, that's not a success. If they say, I want to double the size of the business next year, I want to look back at the end of next year and go, that was all right. We did that. What's next?
Yeah.
One of the questions I love is, that is the what's next question, because that means we've hit the goal, we've done what we set out to do. So now we can look ahead to what's the next thing we need to do? What's the next thing we want to achieve?
When you engage with particularly new clients, I'm sure they probably have, in their opinion, an idea of what the problem is and what they need to have resolved. Do you often find that when you actually get under the skin, do investigations, no doubt talk to lots of people, you find that actually the problem they thought they had isn't that problem, and there's something that's far more fundamental? Perhaps they've become so immersed in the business they're blind to some of the things that happen. What's your experience as a consultant and mentor in this case?
Usually, I'd say actually almost universally, the first problem that's expressed is not the real problem. And the first problem that's expressed, I'll give you an example. I recently was talking to a new client, and they had come to me and said, the problem I've got is that we just we haven't got enough sales. We can't grow the business fast enough. Commonly expressed problem. We spent some time together. We looked at, I go through a process that encourages people to share with me things about their business, during which they normally have some insights about their business they were not really aware of, but by asking the right questions, they become aware of them. And it became very clear that they were working, full tilt and beyond, Monday to Friday, early till late, Saturday and Sunday, most weekends, doing some work as well. And yet they wanted more clients. And, it's kind of, well, where's the capacity for these people? If you do attract these new clients, where's the capacity? And what had been happening was they were attracting new clients, doing great marketing, attracting new clients, becoming overstretched, delivering a poor service, losing clients because they were delivering a poor service, and then doing more marketing, getting more clients, overstretching. So we spent some time thinking about strategies to address the customer service and making that resilient and scalable, so they could then grow and not lose the quality of the service they were providing, and therefore not lose the clients in those periods. And that would then ultimately lead to the goal that they really wanted, which was, doubling the business over the course of a couple of years. They're on track to do that. We haven't got there yet. They're a fairly new client, but I'm confident, because they've seen what the real problem is, that they're now, are addressing the issues in the right way, rather than just throwing more money at marketing, turning on the advertising tap, getting people knocking on their door, and then going, oh, but we can't serve you.
Yeah. So you had a really high degree of churn then, basically. Yeah. And I guess they're really stressed because every person coming through the door was new. So there's a huge ramp up, an educational phase where you're actually not adding value. You're just having to learn and study and figure out what's going on. And that doesn't earn you money, really, does it?
No, and building relationships, which, if you've built a strong, trusting relationship with a client, with a customer, if this is the occasional mess up, as long as you're honest about it, those clients, customers are just going to go, that's okay. But, let's make sure it doesn't happen again. Sure. But they're not going to walk away. When you have no relationship or a very limited relationship with them, that mistake is often critical to the whole long-term relationship. They'll walk away.
Yeah. And again, as you say, if they're churning at a high rate, no doubt the reviews that perhaps they're being left with in some way, shape or form, that starts to fester and it starts to impact new businesses want to come in and work with them, thinking, oh, hold on a minute, there's some problems here. They don't seem to have a great reputation anymore. It's a naturally downward spiral, I guess.
And they are vicious circles, but they're relatively easily broken. And if one of your listeners is sitting there thinking, oh, I'm a bit like that, then my advice is really quite simple. First of all, slow down, turn the tap off rather than turning it up in terms of new business, and take a hard look at, have you got the right skills in the business right now to service the customers you've already got? Fix the value proposition, and the rest will sort itself out afterwards.
Right. That's really interesting. And I'm certainly glad that I've hit the nail on the head in some respects there. Brilliant. Now, the next thing that everybody is facing right now are huge advancements in AI, technology, social media. Everything's developing and accelerating in a sort of abundance and frequency. How important do you see these latest innovations in building better businesses? How do you encourage and foster innovation and adaptation, should we say, and adoption with your clients of these new technologies as well?
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, because they are coming thick and fast, aren't they? This the advent of ChatGPT, really it's been a long time coming. It's not that new a technology, but it's new to the business world in the availability and the speed in which we can use it. Simple advice, really. These are tools, not solutions. They're a hammer looking for a nail, but if you haven't got a nail, they're not going to solve your problem. So, the first thing again is to step back and ask, what am I trying to achieve? And can these tools help me achieve that? There's a lot of risks with AI, I think, not in terms of some of the stories that you hear in the press about, they're going to take over the world and make humans redundant. I don't think that's really a risk, certainly not in our lifetimes. There's a lot more work to do yet than that. But I think what the risks do lie is that they're not accuracy checks. So they're not reliably giving you perfect information. We still have a responsibility, particularly to our clients and customers, if we are using those tools, to make sure that they are giving us accurate information. But I use them, and I'd recommend that, particularly for things like marketing, where you're perhaps struggling with working out what's the best copy that I can put together for, have a shot at it yourself, and then feed it through AI as part of a prompt of, improve the text here, make this text more compelling, something where you're giving it the base material and using, it's then able to go out and use what ChatGPT does, which is predominantly just predict what the best next word is in the context of the sentence it's already built. And it'll give you that insight maybe into some new forms of words that can improve your marketing. So the problem is my marketing copy isn't good enough. The solution isn't just to go to ChatGPT and say, write me marketing copy for, the Real Life Buyer podcast, because it might give you stuff that is not particularly accurate or not particularly compelling. But if you go to it with your best guess and then say, improve this, make this more compelling, or make it shorter, or make it punchier, or whatever you think it needs, it's an iterative process too, that you're going backwards and forwards a few times to get to a really good answer. And I think that's true of all of the technologies, that they're just a tool, and we need to find the right way to use that tool. Before we had electric drills, we would have drilled holes by hand, and it would have taken a long time. We got an electric drill, and suddenly that was quicker. But it drills a bad hole quicker as well as a good hole. It doesn't help you put the hole in the right place. Yeah. And then we got laser things that draw lines on the walls, and that helps you to put the hole in the right place, but only if you've got a good design. It still comes back to, you've got to know what the goal is, and then decide what tools you need to make it easy to reach that goal.
Yeah, it's a great analogy, that. I find ChatGPT, and there's obviously other versions now, Bard and Bing and all the other things that you can, there's thousands of these things now, but I find it quite useful for if you're stuck and you need some ideas. It's a great idea generator. It's not necessarily going to give you the right answers, as you rightly say, but at least it makes your mind think, oh, yes, that's an angle I didn't think of. And that's where I found it to be quite useful. Just thinking about your clients, though, and perhaps the generation that may be leading the business. some of these things perhaps fearful. They don't want to consider adopting them. They don't even want to perhaps try them, and they leave that for the next generation down. But of course, there's some things you say they can use right now. Do you stumble across challenges with clients that perhaps are more towards the end of their careers, not wanting to adopt some of these new technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's partly because if you view them as a tool, there will be times when you think, actually, I don't need that tool, and I don't need that learning curve. And I think that's true, and I think it's okay not to use them. And certainly, as you move towards the end of a career in business, I talked about a training company with a family wanting to step away from it. Some of the motivations to go into something where there's going to be a 2-year learning curve to get really good at using that thing, whatever that thing is, then you're looking at, well, I'm going to retire in 2.5 years. Do I really want to put that effort in? You can understand why they wouldn't. I think, having said that, though, we also have to bear in mind that the other people in your market will be using those things. They will be finding ways to use them. And, my advice then is to think, okay, where am I in this journey of mastery that I talk about in the book? How can I intentionally, it's why that's one of the words in the title, it's intentional mastery, it's not accidental mastery. If you're going to be intentional, where can I take the skills that I really am extremely strong at and make those even stronger, so that in the last few years that I'm going to be working in this business, I am being seen by my peers and by my clients as the go-to person for that skill, that expertise, because that will protect you regardless of what others who are coming on behind are doing with new tools. That reputation as the master of what you do will protect you, for a while. I mean, they're gnawing at your heels. They're going to come and they will take that crown eventually. But, in terms of a strategy for the last few years when you're going to be working, I think deepening your skills in the areas where you really, really enjoy and get great joy from what you do. It's why the last section of the book is called Mastering Joy. We don't work all our lives to get to the end of it going, well, I'm glad that's over.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Hopefully we get to the end of it going, actually, it was tough at times, but I've had a fab career and I've enjoyed the bulk of it, and I've certainly enjoyed the last few years and had a great time. And that, to me, seems to be a goal worth chasing.
Yeah. Now, other than reading the book, I'll see which we want to encourage people to do, because it is exceptionally good. How may people make contact with you, where they may find out more about what you do? Have you got any social media channels, or what's the best place to seek you out?
Yeah, so I have the wonderful advantage of an unusual surname, and it's spelled Buist. So if you just Google that, you find me mostly. There is an 1950s American bodybuilder who shares my Christian name as well. So you might find him, but I think he's mostly been driven off the page. So yeah, williambuist.com as well. That's the website. And obviously you can contact me through that. I have an audit on the website if you're interested in seeing where your business is right now in comparison with others. And if you fill that in, I'll give you some personalized advice, given the results that you tell in the completing the audit, that will help you to build a better business tomorrow. So that's at audit.williambuist.com. I like to make things as easy as I can for people to find. So audit.williambuist.com will take you to that. williambuist.com, the general website, and I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and even Threads. So new tool,
right.
So just taking a look at that too. So look for me on any of those platforms. Again, if you just search my surname, you will usually find me pretty close to the top of the list.
Excellent. Okay, so now our time is coming very quickly to an end. Now, looking at your own personal journey, can you tell us about any major hurdles or roadblocks you have faced and how you overcame and steered your way around and perhaps through them that are reflected perhaps even in your book?
Yeah, well, there's a number along the way. I've talked already on the podcast about the time when Lloyd's and TSB merged, and that left me kind of wondering if I even had a job for a little while. So that was one hurdle. I think the 2008 banking crisis too was a real inflection point for me personally, in terms of recognizing that, things happen beyond our control in the economy and in the world, and, rules change and all of those things can happen. But it really taught me that, if I want to be strong and thrive and develop through periods like that, that's nobody else's responsibility but mine. And the big learning that I took away from it was that, I have got talents, I have got skills, I've got knowledge, I've got a lifetime of experience, as we all have, as all your listeners have. And within that, there are things that you can develop and build and master that other people will value and enjoy with you. And getting real clarity on where you should focus your own personal development to be the best person you can be is how we build the best business that we can build as well.
That's great. That's a great note to finish on. Again, thank you very much for your time. It's been brilliant getting together with you to read your book and share with everybody what a great mastery of a book it is. I really do encourage people to read it. It's a very easy read, but full of great information, very informative, very useful. So please, everybody, go out and check out William's book, please.
Thank you, Dave. That's very kind of you. And I'd, if anybody wants to contact me after they've read it, or even while they're reading it, to get some clarification on anything or some help and support, then please reach out. I'd be very happy to talk to you.
Take care and speak to you again soon, perhaps.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Dave.
Bye.
So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it and it's given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. If you are a purchasing or a supply chain professional, business owner or director, come and join my Facebook group, the Purchasing and Supply Chain Community Hub, a safe place to engage with like-minded, friendly people. See you soon. Bye.